Let's speak about this issue. And Rajiva Wijesinha is a former Sri Lankan minister and also a former vice president at Liberal International. He joins us from Colombo. Welcome to the programme, sir. So we hear Oxfam calling for an increase in taxation of billionaires to prevent profiteering. What goes through your mind when you hear this?
Well, in a sense, it is the apotheosis of what has been happening over the last 30-odd years. And perhaps Liberal International is a good instance of what has happened. You know, when I first joined Liberal International, the great gurus of liberalism were, following on the welfare state of beverage in England, John Rawls, whose basic idea about social policy was what was called maximin. This is in the theory of justice of the 70s. And the idea was that all interventions should have maximized the position of the worst off. Now, all that changed in the 80s. And, I still remember my first Liberal International, John Galbraith, talk about Reaganomics. The argument was that the rich were not working because they didn't have enough money, and the poor were not working because they had too much money. And unfortunately, that has become the norm now. I'm not saying that that was Hayek's philosophy, but there has been an unthinking allegiance to the whole idea of private sector. And the more incentives you give the private sector, the better the economy will do. And there's a hope that the profits will trickle down.
And
they simply haven't.
If I may interrupt, you're speaking to us from Sri Lanka, a country. Sadly, your president said the only option now for Sri Lanka is to seek support from the IMF. Our country has collapsed. What is the role of millionaires, billionaires there? What Oxfam is discussing, how would that apply to Sri Lanka today?
Well, the role of the current president is to protect all those millionaires and billionaires. As you're probably aware, there was active protest against the last government. And unfortunately, some elements in the West were attacking the Rajapaksas for their successful war effort. But the reason why the people of Sri Lanka turned against them was blatant corruption. And there has been absolutely no effort by the present president, who is now in cahoots with them. But even when he became prime minister and virtual head of the government from 2015, there was no attempt to get the money back. And what the millionaires should be doing is not just tax, but punitive taxes. When I ran for president, not in any hope of winning in 2019, but to get some ideas across. And one thing I've kept saying for ever since I got into parliament, was assets declarations must be public. Anyone in any public position, and this would include public companies, public quoted companies, their assets should be on websites for people to challenge.
But how realistic is that? How realistic is that?
Well, there's absolutely no reason why it shouldn't be, because we do have a Declaration of Assets Act. And in fact, now, in theory, the assets of people in positions of authority can be checked by anybody, but it's a long process. But, if our argument is transparency, why not have them up on websites, all parliamentarians, all ministers? And then we'll know exactly how much wealth has gone. But I suppose the real problem is not just the impunity of the crooked who have so much money now, not only in this country but elsewhere, but also the very fact that social policy has changed completely. And there's no understanding that if you say the private sector is the engine of growth, and there are good arguments for saying that statist socialism was a failure, you must make sure that it's not by a process of chance that the poor benefit. There must be social policies designed to I'm not saying destroy inequality, but to at least reduce them, to give people a chance. And, we had politicians all the way until, in the first 30 or 40 years of independence, particularly President Premadasa, who changed completely the extremist neo-economics of J.R. Jawad.
Rajiva, we've run out of time, I'm afraid, but thank you so much for speaking to us today at TRT World. Rajiva Wijesinha, former Sri Lankan minister and former vice president at Liberal International. Thank you so much for speaking to us today from Colombo.
Thank you.